Hey, it's Hammer Time. Special episode of Hammer Time with Congressman David Schweikert in his Washington, D.C. office. David, thank you.
You really have to call it Hammer Time.
I have to call it Hammer Time. In fact, the true story, we originally I wanted to call it Hammered in Phoenix. Like a Bosch. We couldn't use that. We couldn't use that. You were one of the architects of a once-in-a-generation tax bill. About a year later, what do you see the effects of that tax bill on our nation and our state's economy?
Even with the tax reform, revenues were up by about $14 billion. Employment, when you look at the growth in employment all up and down the different stratas. If I'd come to you 1 year ago, and said unemployment in non-high school graduating blue collar would be as low as it is today. It was only 2 years ago we were having these conversations of, whole stratas of our society were basically going to be permanently marginalized. And it didn't happen. We proved that if you do quality economic policy, the growth has been stunning.
When you tease that out, because you've also done a lot of work on regulatory reform, if you had to say, is it the 1-2 punch of the jobs bill and tax cuts and reg reform, or which?
Look, you want to be intellectually honest. It's more complicated. I believe the things we did in tax reform, it's not fair to call it a tax cut. We did much more redesigning the way the tax code incentivized productivity, incentivized capital purchases to make it so an organization would be more productive, so it could pay its workers more. And we're actually starting to see those numbers coming through. Yeah. In the regulatory reform,
and wages are going up. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's
and they're going up in the very populations that, smart economists just a couple of years ago were saying we're permanently marginalized.
Yes.
Turns out they were wrong. When you start looking at regulatory reform, if you really dice into what's had effect, some of it wasn't deregulation. That's just sort of almost political pop culture language. It's not true. It was sort of some rationalization of what actually makes society healthier, safer, and what actually was just filling up file cabinets full of paper.
It was also setting a signal, we're done with regulations, doesn't have a benefit for public safety and health, and it's just, for a small business community, it felt like incoming under the previous administration.
But
no end in sight.
And where we desperately need very creative chambers like yours and offices, hopefully like ours, is there's some technology opportunities to even go to another level of more elegant regulation. Where you can use crowdsourced information and other things to say, we've made society healthier and safer, but you don't fill up file cabinets full of paper no one ever looks at.
Is blockchain part of this?
Blockchain is actually more of a secure way to hold information. So, like for us in Arizona, we need to sell the idea that in a couple of years, our driver's licenses don't meet real ID standards. So you and I have to get a different ID to get on an airplane. Turns out, you and I should be able to sell the state of Arizona the concept of take a picture of your birth certificate, take a picture of your passport, take a picture of these things. The algorithm builds it. You could have real ID held in a blockchain on your phone. A way that a couple million Arizonans don't have to go line up at the DMV offices to get a new driver's license. That's an example of using technology to deal with a coming bureaucratic nightmare.
Well, we would love to work with you on that, because that would be a real problem for the state of Arizona if people...
But that's when it's very personal, but those same sort of technologies can be used in our import-export, in the way we certify our production that we sell around the world. It has this wonderful cascade effect.
One of the areas that Ways and Means has jurisdiction over is trade. Mm-hmm. You have been a very outspoken proponent and have been successful in changing one portion, more than one portion, but an important portion of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, NAFTA 2.0. Talk a little bit about your involvement on the de minimis standards and other pieces of that agreement.
It's both de minimis and we'll call it ISDS.
Investor state.
Investor state protections and those things. being a border state, and particularly being a border state with lots of trade that crosses through our jurisdiction, the relationship with Mexico is absolutely crucial. But as we start to build in Arizona the concept of, inland ports of entry and the ability to become one of the true distribution manufacturing areas, there's this thing called de minimis, where a product can come in from Canada or Mexico into the United States, and if it's under $800, it basically sails through customs. There's no duty on it. But if we send something, it's $20 or more into Mexico, all of a sudden it stops, it has to go through customs, there's additional paperwork, and there may be actual taxes on it. Well, that causes a problem. It means you have full containers or airplanes coming in and empty going out. And we need to start to harmonize those dollar amounts so it's truly bilateral trade.
Well, and now I believe it's going up to about $100 for Mexico,
it's
doubling.
It's a start. I'm still not happy, but I'm never happy. We're going the right direction.
You also talk a little bit about trade with China. We've got tit for tat things going on in terms of tariffs, and where do you see that going? There's some real legitimate issues that we need to deal with China.
We've had lots of presentations from really smart, very qualified experts that China has been cheating at lots of things, but they were the types of cheating that should have been adjudicated at the WTO. Problem is the WTO mechanics work either very slowly or they do not work at all. So even as we're working through our trade disputes with China, I believe the world needs to come together and refine the World Trade Organization rules. It needs to move dramatically faster. There needs to be a limitation on the appeal, on the appeal, on the appeal, and then a new form of cheating. If we can tighten up that, we don't have to end up in this world of tit-for-tat tariffs, but the WTO would function. But right now, the reason we're in this is it doesn't function.
Another area that you have been outspoken on during your congressional career is entitlements and the need for us to do something there.
Yeah, sorry, I know I'm interrupting, but it's a demographic issue. And we keep, avoiding the math. Our math is in about 11 years, we have 2 workers for every 1 person in retirement. That's in 11 years. We believe in about a dozen years, we'll have as many over 65 as we do what we call teenagers and younger. First time in our country's history. And
that's already, I would say, it's more and more emerging as a concern for...
There's a way to make it work, but it's not just entitlement reform. And you have to come up with, I think, a much more holistic approach that's saying, I'm going to have to use technology, I'm going to have to use the tax code, I'm going to have to use immigration, I'm going to have to use incentives. And you have to do it all together. In reality, we need to do it soon. But think of the last political cycle we just got through. We did some pretty sophisticated polling in the Phoenix area. And if you were on the other side, it was, oh no, there's no such thing as an entitlement issue. We don't even speak the same language issue-wise, and so we live in a world of sort of fantasy math.
It's still a divided government, Republican Senate, Republican White House. You're on a powerful committee. Thoughts on how you continue to advance the agenda that you've worked on?
I don't know yet. This is my very first time to serve in the minority. I have a couple, I think, pretty good friends who are on the Democrat side who will be in the majority on my committee. And we've actually had these running conversations because there's smart people on the Democrat side, as even on our Republican side, who know we have a crisis coming. And we've actually had some good things happening in our society with the changes in the tax code are helping grow the size of our economy. Now we need to do the next steps that continue that, and does that growth in the economy, the growth in productivity, the growth in wages, give us the opportunity to start now to shore up our futures in the retirement system. And that's not Republican and Democrat, it's math. The problem is, as Republicans and Democrats, we use it to bludgeon each other during election cycles, and it's one of the reasons our voters are always so confused about who's telling them the truth. because the political campaigns do a really bad job explaining really complex issues.
Well, on behalf of the chamber community, we appreciate everything you have done to stimulate growth. I mean, this is the first time in my professional life we've had more jobs open than people to fill them, and you have played a very important part in that positive story.
Last thought, whether it be the chamber, those in an elected office, we need to actually have a much more robust conversation of the incredible moral value of there being opportunity in our society. When you see people being recruited from our downtown homeless campus for employment, right out of our prisons for employment, individuals who have not graduated high school now having really robust job opportunities. These are all sort of moral issues that we should be joyful about. And we've done a really bad job explaining that if you love and care for people in our society, growth provides opportunity.
Well, I appreciate everything you're doing to just get us back to basic math and where we could have just a good, honest discussion. Congressman David Schweikert, thank you for being on Hammer Time.
Thanks, Glenn.